This is the Padua Podcast Network. We both wore masks the entire time. It was a bit harder to believe, but we proved it wasn't impossible to take a long walk with a cloth mask on. Running a Fever, Episode 214, A View from Inside the Hospital in the COVID Crisis. Hello, welcome to Running a Fever. My name is Michael Davis, and this is a podcast about fitness, diet, and medicine. My aim is to live a long, healthy, happy, active life right up to the very end, and for you to do so. So let's do that together, and let's get on with it. I went for a walk with a good friend recently, 5-point screw, 5 miles around Lake Fayetteville, of course. It was a beautiful day. It had been months since I had seen him in person. It was humid. Our featured photo shows the fog we saw coming off the water, actually. It reminds me of an old Deep Purple song, which I will not sing for copyright reasons as well as aesthetic reasons. We both wore masks the entire time. That was one of the reasons I didn't record, and it was a bit harder to believe, but we proved it wasn't impossible to take a long walk with a cloth mask on. Now, I understand why you wouldn't want to wear a mask if you were running, but I was kind of shocked that I didn't see a single soul wearing a mask. Yeah, like many outdoor places these days, we saw more than the usual number of people for 6:30 on a Sunday morning. Outdoor places are just more crowded because people are just tired of being inside all the time. I saw one couple that was practicing appropriate spacing, but didn't wear masks. But I mean, again, these people were exercising, so it can be difficult if you're breathing hard while you're exercising. But you know, I tend to think it's no wonder that in our area, the number of cases is growing more rapidly and, you know, possibly at the fastest rate nationwide right now. My friend who is a registered nurse gave me some insight into what it's like working in the hospital during the pandemic. So obviously he's physically going to work. His work is critical and it can't be done remotely. And on June 7 of 2020, he is now seeing the highest number of cases yet in his hospital. The number is approaching 20 in this one hospital. And remember that the vast majority of cases do not require hospitalization. So that's maybe a bigger number than it seems. So he's much busier now. While the elective procedures have fallen in number, most of these are not procedures that a patient can simply choose not to do. After being, you know, it's something they need, but it's just not, you know, super time sensitive. But after being delayed for a few months, these things can often become urgent. So he has a lot of strict procedures governing how he does his job. Of course, he's masked all day, regardless of whether he was working with COVID patients. And when he does work with a COVID patient, he must don usually a clean set of scrubs when he changes, which he changes when he finishes with the patient, before he moves on to anyone else. He also said that he's worn what's known in the biz, and they use these in medical situations as well as in other situations like industrial areas where, you know, you can't have anything fibers on your body or something interacting with. Like I know that I had a friend who worked at Motorola where they produce silicon processors, and he was an electrician, but he was in this what they call a clean room, and he had to wear but they call them bunny suits because, you know, you kind of look funny with it goes over all your clothes and you have a hat and everything. I don't know. It's paper or plastic, and it's an overgarment, goes over everything, and then you get booties on your shoes and you get a cap. So that's what he's having to wear anytime he goes in with a COVID patient. Now, he also has a face covering on his face face covering on his face that's or on his head, that it's a plastic shield, like a transparent shield that covers a 180 degree radius. He doesn't see any children. We have a really good children's hospital in the area, so that's where they would go. He says that most patients who have to go on a ventilator do not survive. And he's seeing more deaths just overall than he would normally see. And of course, you do see death in the hospital, but he's seeing a lot more than he would normally see, or more than normal. On the other hand, most of the patients have complications. So most of them are not just dying of COVID-19, the virus. Some of the examples of the complications that people have are diabetes, COPD, and cancer. He's also seeing a higher concentration of Marshallese patients who have COVID-19. This part of Arkansas has the most Marshallese people outside their native Marshall Islands. This is of great concern if there is some reason the disease is affecting them disproportionately. Our state government does have information in the Marshallese language, but of course, every Marshallese person I've met speaks English just fine. But this, along with my friends' observations, are anecdotal, so take that with a grain of salt. I do know that our State Department of Health is conducting tracing in cooperation with large employers who are also tracing the passage of the disease from person to person in order to better attach what they call the vectors of spread. In other words, if everyone's going to Joe's Bar and Grill, then maybe you ought to look at what they're doing at Joe's Bar and Grill to help stop the spread of the disease there. No offense to Joe, that was just an example. I don't want to make too much of this Marshallese thing, but I think it's important to reach out when a particular community may be disproportionately impacted. So, it was great to get out. I'm not getting out as much these days, but it's even more good to, spend some less socially distanced but safe time with my friend. And, of course, many thanks to him for letting me share this information with you. There are some references in the show notes, so check those out. And, if you got the fever, tell somebody else about running a fever. And if you don't have it, catch it. I will talk to you next time on Running a Fever.